Good morning, Dan and Amy. Know about the discrimination suit filed by a handful of staffers against Spalding and his running mate Stratton. This other story, though, is interesting. I mean, they're both sort of under the rubric of the left cannibalizing the left. 40th Ward, Aldermanic Ward, candidate forum on Tuesday night was not too friendly to incumbent Alderman Pat O'Connor.
No, it was not.
This in Edgewater, the moderator, talk about walking into a bit of a buzzsaw. The moderator of the forum, one writer, Rick Perlstein.
Have you ever heard of him?
No.
Me neither.
Tweeted after the event, "Now that I'm not moderator, I can immoderately report that Alderman Pat O'Connor of the 40th Ward is a racist troll who's morally unfit for public office for accusing his Nigerian-American opponent of not being for the community but for Nigerians." Here's the exchange, and this is important in the context of the mayor's race, which I'll explain again momentarily. Here's what Alderman Pat O'Connor said.
First and foremost, your comments show how little you do know about what goes on in the city of Chicago.
Bluebirds are out.
In the city of Chicago, voted for that investment in the West Side on the same day that they voted for the Obama Library on the South Side. It was a historic day in the African American community. Now, if you want to talk about when you run for community, this is your fundraising invitation. It doesn't talk about community. It talks about building Nigerian power in Chicago. Now, I mean, for God's sake, if you want to talk about being part of a community, and this is how you're going to raise your money, I can't understand how you expect that. You can play that way.
And this is about him supporting the building of the police academy, which apparently the audience didn't support. His opponent, one of the opponents he's referencing, is a gentleman named Ugo Okere. He's the Nigerian American. He responded to O'Connor.
Alderman O'Connor, I would like you to reread what was on that flyer, because what it said on that flyer was Nigerian political power. And guess what? There are different constituencies across the city of Chicago. Every single one deserves political power. Every single one. Because we cannot do it. They say that some people deserve more than others, and act as if we have equal political power in the city of Chicago. No, that's not true.
So, O'Connor was a racist for suggesting that Okere is engaged in identity politics, focusing on Nigerian political power to the exclusion of sort of a unified vision of community. And then Okere confirms that's what he was doing.
Right.
And let me tell you something. So now O'Connor is facing the Boo Birds and the identity politics mob, and I have zero sympathy for him, just as I have zero sympathy for Spalding and Stratton, because this is the politics the left plays. And now it is...
They're eating their own.
That's correct. Now it's turning on them, because somebody can always intersectionality you one better. And that's what they're facing. And so, and this goes back to Chance the Rapper's press conference this week, and all of the discussion by the political press corps in this city. How can we bring the city together? How can we bring the city together to face our challenges together, to forge solutions together? Okay, so who's going to be the black candidate? Who's going to be the Irish candidate? Who's going to be the Nigerian candidate? Who's going to be the Latino candidate? Who's going to be the Latina candidate?
And who's going to be the Greek candidate?
Yeah, right.
Don't forget about the Greeks.
John Cass, he's running.
Yeah.
So square the circle for me to help us do that, in addition to talk about his presentation before the City Club this week of his financial plan for the city of Chicago, is former CPS superintendent and mayoral candidate Paul Vallas. Paul, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. That was a good wake-up call this morning.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I know you want to focus on dollars and cents, and that's super important in the worst governed city in the country, major city. But the racial politics can't be ignored, and I want to get your comment on what you heard in that O'Connor 40th Ward candidate forum, and what you heard from Chance the Rapper this week in announcing his endorsement, and just the balkanization of our continued balkanization of Chicago by race and other, and gender and orientation and every other identity.
Well, that's a lot to handle in just about 5 or 6 minutes. But at the end of the day, I kind of ignore it all. Quite frankly, I mean, if I'm going to be categorized or labeled or whatever, I just my approach is just to identify what the real problems are and to offer solid solutions and to go out there and talk to people about them. When I ran the Chicago Public Schools, I didn't experience the racial politics or any racial animosity, or I've worked in districts that were overwhelmingly minority and overwhelmingly poor, and I had few, if any, days where I really felt that there was balkanization, in part because my approach was to be honest and direct with people and offer them real solutions. When I go into the communities, the poorest communities in the city, I don't get shouted down about my support for building a police academy, if not a bigger and a better police academy than the one they have proposed. People want to know about why their neighborhoods are not safe enough, why there aren't enough cops, why their response to 911 is not quick enough, their high property taxes, their killer fees and fines, and the lead in the water. And the fact that their schools are substandard, and if they can't get their kid into a magnet school, somehow they feel they've got to either move out of the city or find some other way to get their kid into a quality school. Those are the things that I hear time and again in all the communities.
And I'll tell you what, that's an answer. You know what that answer is? That's the answer, I think, how most people actually live their lives on a daily basis. There is no racial discord. There is no identity discord, but it gets whipped up by organizations that have an interest in doing it and amplified by a media that has an interest in doing it. And so, I mean, I guess one way to do it is just lead by example, like you're suggesting. That's a fair answer.
Yeah, that's right. You just have to plow on. And sometimes people resort to those type of things in part because they don't have answers and they don't have solutions.
Yeah.
Well, I've been to more community. When I go into the community, even when I'm talking to some of the biggest advocates, and some of the most vocal advocates, I don't even think that I've had a bad day. Now, I'll have plenty of bad days before this campaign is over. But, when I explain to them that, yes, this is why we need a police academy, but you know what? And this is why we need more cops. But, we also need a stronger infrastructure. We also need better training. We also need to have the right sergeant ratios so that we have the right supervision. And we also have to take advantage of the, 9,000 ROTC cadets that we have in the Chicago Public Schools, and perhaps they can be the next generation of police officers and firefighters and paramedics, and so that the police department over the years can become more reflective of the community in a natural, organic way. And when I say those type of things, I don't get shouted down. People don't accuse me of, being pro-police and anti-community. People listen. People want answers.
And you know about this, too, because your wife's a police officer and both of your sons are police officers, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they're great cops. And my boys are wonderful cops. They're wonderful police officers. And as you know, my older son was a combat medic with the 5th Marines. He was in combat. And my younger boy was in the Marine Corps. And they're just extraordinary. They love being police officers. They are well received by the communities that they serve in.
All right. Now let's talk about your financial plan, black and white in terms of numbers, not in terms of race. Your plan includes $250 million in additional property tax increases over the next 5 years, while instituting a cap at 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less, as part of that. So, I mean, property tax is sort of a bête noire of mine because it's destroying and destroying the city, the state, driving people out of here. $250 million increase in property taxes against the backdrop of the highest property taxes in the nation, in the context of an $8 billion budget. You can achieve savings and restructuring and shrinking of government elsewhere to prevent from the need for more property tax increases?
Well, what I did was I looked at 3 things. First of all, my approach on all of my budgets has been to lay out multi-year budgets, like 5-year plans. That's how I turned a billion structural deficit in Chicago Public Schools into $1 billion in cash balances when I left, and 13 bond rating upgrades, and operating in a property tax cap that I've recommended for the city. But basically, what I've said is, look, we're going to have some sort of an agenda at the state level that's real and practical, that can be phased in over 5 years. And the things I've articulated are all things that are there and things that are doable. And then I've laid out a whole series of measures to bring spending under control over the next 5 years, so that instead of asking property taxpayers to finance the remaining pension obligations, which are well over $1 billion, because that's how much they're going to have to increase. That's how much they're going to have to increase funding for pensions because of the state mandates. I've said what I'd like to do is I want to be able to accomplish these other things on the state and on the spending side, so that we can, in effect, limit property tax increases to 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. And that's individual increases. So whether you're a homeowner or you're a business, for that matter, or you're a landlord, you're never going to see your property taxes. The rate of inflation has been about 2 to 3%. You're never going to see your property taxes grow by more than 2 or 3%. I think that would be a reasonable approach to take over a 5-year period. And that's the way we have to. That's the way we have to approach it. And what I've tried to do, as you can see by my city club speech, is to be very specific in articulating the areas, for example, that I would cut, and some of the ideas I have at the state level, as well as what I would do on the revenue side.
Well, I mean, I appreciate your candor in saying, just telling us like it is, but I am, as a Chicagoan for the past 22 years, I am so sick of paying higher property taxes. I feel like I'm paying for the sins of the politicians, the people that were irresponsible in the past. And is there any other way you can do it besides raising our property taxes?
Well, yeah, I mean, there is. Going and getting a constitutional amendment to have the ability to negotiate pension funding compromises and then have them stick, and not have the very political Supreme Court overrule them time and time again, is the most direct way to do that. But short of that, you've got to be realistic and you've got to be practical. Look, Emmanuel's raised property taxes and a combination of other taxes and fees by $1.5 billion. And they're going to be facing another property tax increase of that size. What I'm trying to do is to lay out a strategy to minimize those increases. And I think if you go to taxpayers and you say, look, we can solve the city's financial problems while at the same time creating conditions so that we can have enough police officers in the community, we can have the type of economic development investment in all communities so that we can begin to grow the city, because the city's declining. The city's lost 17% of its residential property tax wealth just because of the declining city. I mean, if somebody said we can do this and never raise taxes beyond the rate of inflation or 5%, whichever is less, and again, it's been historically the last 10 years been about 2 to 3%, I think people would consider that to be prudent financial management. But I've never been one to present proposals that were not substantive. Worst case scenario,
right.
Those are the conditions that I can create, I believe.
Well, just in terms of what's realistic, though, you also suggest new revenue from Chicago casino. Mm-hmm. From legalization of recreational marijuana. So dope and gambling is our path to prosperity.
Well, the reality is they're going to legalize cannabis. Yeah. So I think the point that I'm making is if they're going to legalize it, let's make sure we get our fair share of tax revenue. Because, in the past, the state will pretend it's like a lottery. We're going to legalize cannabis, and the money's going to go into the school funding formula. And we're going to get that, and it's going to be smoke and mirrors, and then it's not going to have an impact whatsoever. So I'm going to say if it is going to be legalized, we might as well get a share of the revenue like they've done in Colorado and other states. And at the end of the day, too, if we have an opportunity to basically get a casino, let's take advantage of it, and let's secure the money so that we can use some of that money to avoid property tax increases. But I'm not offering those as single solutions. What I've done is at the state level is lay out an agenda of 5 or 6 things, because I believe we need to go to the state with an agenda. Local governments are always screwed, pardon the expression, when it comes when it comes to state action. The state's always imposing more mandates on local governments,
Yeah, right.
while not giving them the revenues to support those mandates. So I'm trying, based on my 12 years experience in Springfield, I'm trying to articulate what we can get from Springfield so we can minimize the need to raise local property taxes.
With respect to the schools, we understand from Econ 101 that competition improves goods and services and lowers costs. So what about increasing competition within CPS to do just that?
Well, as you know, I'm. If you read the blogs, there are some people who think I invented charter schools. In New Orleans, we created the nation's first 100% school choice district. So, I've been a supporter of school choice. I've been supportive of traditional public school choice. So I've never been a wallflower on those type of issues. The challenge that they have in the schools, obviously, is the fact that they've lost 70,000 students since I departed the Chicago Public Schools, I might add. Mm-hmm. And because they have not made the schools attractive enough, because there are too many substandard schools. And, I think the decline of the schools and the city colleges have lost 1/3 of their population is also having an impact on the city and is also resulting in people voting with their feet, which is moving out of the city. So at the end of the day, I've supported competition. I always have. And I believe that we can make the schools better. And I think we can make the schools better within the context of the available revenues. Look, we all want more money, and we all want the state to fully fund the school aid formula that they just enacted. But at the end of the day, just as I was able to straighten out the school's financial problems when I was CEO and left the schools with 12 bond rating upgrades, I'm pretty confident that given the present financial situation, I'm going to be able to perform with a similar level of success when I become mayor.
All right. He is Paul Vallas, former CEO of CPS, candidate for mayor of Chicago in February. Paul, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate it.
And thanks so much for giving me the time, and have a great day to you and your listeners.
All right. Thank you,
Thanks,
sir.
Paul. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.